I'm gonna say some words in Spanish first, and then we can start.
Great.
Properly. Oh, where are my notes? My notes. I'm no one without them.
¿Se apaga esto cuando, aunque aunque siga grabando?
No debería. ¿Se está grabando?
O sea,
Si está grabando,
no hace eso de...
Bueno, pues estamos aquí en el NH Avilés, en el Celsius, una vez más, y en esta ocasión vamos a entrevistar a Brandon Sanderson. Brandon, how are you today?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. A little bit busy, stressed, but it's okay. It's okay. I'm going to ask you some questions about the writing process and stuff. So I think you are the perfect match for that because you are a professor at the university, right?
I am.
So there is a lot of people asking you questions about the writing.
It's my favorite topic, so I'm happy to talk about it.
Awesome. Okay. The question that everybody told me that I have to ask you. How do you do to write that much?
See, I'm not very fast. I'm just very consistent. I try to write a little bit each day, and a little bit adds up over time. I make sure I need about 2 4-hour chunks each day in order to keep ahead of things. So I just spend my time doing my job. And I don't think I'm particularly fast. I don't write a lot of words in an hour. I write 400 to 500 words an hour, which is just kind of a middle pace. I usually write from about 1 until 5, and then I go back to work in the evening from about 10 until 2. I just do like my job, and so I spend my time doing it.
What does George R.R. Martin think about that?
Well, you know, George spent a long, long time in this business working very hard to finally get success after decades of publishing. So I think George deserves to be able to take as long as he wants.
That's true. That's true. Okay, as a writing professor, what is the question more time asked to you?
Most of the time, I would say that the question I get from aspiring writers is, how do I actually start? A lot of people have trouble in that they can imagine a really great story in their head, but they're not sure how to get it on the page. And normally this has to do with being afraid to do it wrong. The story they've imagined, they think, is just this beautiful, wonderful thing, and then they start to write it and they find that their skill isn't equivalent to their aspirations, and so they get very discouraged. And I'd say, you know, I get a wide variety of questions, but one of the most common is this question of, what do you do when you get discouraged? What do you do when your writing just doesn't match your vision? And my response is, this happens to everyone, particularly writers who start when they're older. I didn't have it when I was a teenager, but in my 20s, certainly I did. And my response is, you know, you have to learn to let yourself be bad at something long enough to get good at it. And it is really tough sometimes to turn off that editor inside of you, but you're never going to learn how to do an ending if you always give up before you get there. Practice really does make perfect, and so I suggest to writers, if they're having trouble, try writing longhand, so with pen and paper, and tell yourself it doesn't have to be perfect until I put it in the computer. Or try going outside with that notebook and writing down ideas. Try doing a nice outline before you start writing. But mostly, just try to throw away that part of your brain that says this isn't good enough yet, because of course it's not. It's your first draft. You're comparing your first draft to published books' 13th drafts. And our first drafts are all terrible too. So go ahead, get that first draft written.
Okay. Awesome. On your website, we can see your work in progress. And you're always working on some books at the same time, and different books. How do you do to write them without getting messy?
So I can usually only write new prose on one book at a time. But while I'm working on that, I can usually be scribbling away at an outline in my notebook, or I can be doing revisions to another book. So it's generally, as long as the books are in different stages, I can do them somewhat simultaneously. I can't write new chapters for 2 different books at once. And so it's kind of a bit of a juggling act to make sure that I'm always working and planning the next book while I'm finishing the writing for the current one.
How do you do the maths? Because it's always with the percentage.
I just have written, at this point, I've written 45 novels, and I know my process very well. Beyond that, because I am an outliner by nature, I usually have a pretty solid outline that I'm working from. And of course, things always change. And you'll notice my percentage bars, sometimes I'm off by like 10% or so at the end. The book will go a little longer, but I have a good estimate of how long a book will be and how long it will take, just because of experience, and because my process lends itself to that. So I can just guess from the final book how much I'm currently finished.
Okay, so you are so accurate.
Not that accurate, but I am fortunate to be accurate enough that I can give an idea to people.
In sagas like Mistborn, you develop very complex world buildings with a magic system, politics, society. I don't know, the very world itself. What is the first idea for something so complex?
So I usually say that building a story for me is not necessarily one idea. Often I have a lot of different ideas somewhat simultaneously. I have my notebook full of ideas I've had. And a book grows when two or more of these ideas combine into an idea that is more interesting because of the combination, if that makes sense. So for Mistborn, there were several multiple ideas I had at the same time, one of which was the idea of what would happen if the hero failed. He was supposed to save the world, right? What if Frodo got to the end of Lord of the Rings and Sauron killed him and took over the world, right? Or what if Harry Potter got to the end and Voldemort, is like, oh, you're just a dumb kid, and took over. That idea was really cool to me, and I played with that. Another idea was my love of the heist novel. Mistborn is about a gang of thieves, and I wanted to tell a story about a heist where everyone in the team had a different magical talent, and they combined their talents to create this heist. A separate idea was for the magic system, which was developed completely independent of this. And as a book grows, I often say it's like, a bunch of atoms bouncing around and smashing into each other and forming molecules. I know that's not how the science actually works, but the shorthand of it, where you get this molecule growing that is different from any of the independent parts. You put carbon and you put hydrogen and you put oxygen together, and you end up with this weird thing that was not like any of those three. That's how a book is. All these separate ideas are smashing together and forming something very interesting together. And once they start to form, I start to build an outline out of that. Say, these are my core ideas. Let's fill in the holes in between by brainstorming.
Okay, awesome. What does an author who has developed such impressive words find exciting? What is exciting for you?
I love still going to films and finding filmmakers who can pull it off, or reading books where the most exciting thing to me is when I read a book where somebody has done something I couldn't have done, did it better than I could have, and it makes me really excited to learn how and study how they did it. So a great book or a great film can absolutely still make me really excited. But once in a while, there's also a really cool idea. When those ideas come, you're like, oh, that will make a great book someday. And it may be 5 or 6 years before I can do it, but that idea is great. I get very excited by that.
Do you find easily these books and movies?
Not as easily as I did before I became a professional, but that makes the ones that really kind of blow my mind even better. I find, because now that I'm a writer myself, I can see just how hard some things are to do and get very, very excited. Like when the Rousseau brothers did Infinity War and made the villain into the protagonist at the same time. That's super hard to do. And so watching that, I was just really excited by watching someone pull off something so difficult. It's like maybe an athlete might get very impressed by something that looks very mundane to us, like someone dismounting, from a routine, and say, "Wow, they did that really hard thing." That the rest of us would be like, "Well, it just all looked like the same." Well, I can see the really hard thing and be really impressed by it, and that's exciting.
Okay, cool. Many writers have the problem that they stopped liking what they wrote after some time. Does it ever happen to you? Is there anything you'd like to change about books you've written?
So it had happened to me early in my career before I got published. There was a time where it was a little harder to enjoy other stories. And this was because I was making that transition. As a fan, I always finished whatever I read, right? And I didn't give up on books. And as a professional, I started to realize that sometimes books just weren't making me excited, and I needed to put them aside. And once I did that and was searching for the ones that made me excited, I recaptured my my love of the genre. But as changing books I've written, you know, I don't think there is any author who is satisfied with any piece of art they've done. No, I think that I could always go back and change. Famous quote, people say it was Da Vinci, but I don't know that it actually was. But someone once said, art is never finished, it's only abandoned. And I love that phrase because that's how it is. You have to just move on eventually.
Have you attempted?
What, to change things? I did go back and revise one of my books between the hardcover and the paperback. I decided that the ending that I had in my outline that I changed when I was writing it was better, and I tweaked it. But the fans went a little crazy. They're like, you can't do this. I'm like, all right, I can't do this. I won't do this anymore. But it was an experiment to see if I could get away with it.
The books aren't yours anymore.
No, they're not. They definitely are not. And that is something you have to be aware of as a writer. And I think that's actually part of the process, right? Like, I don't feel like a writer ever finishes a book, but a fan can finish it for them. Meaning, when you read a book, I'm giving you like 75%. I've got the script, but you're the director. And when you imagine it and make the book into something real, that's when it's finished. And so it can never be finished until people read it. But then, in so doing, I'm giving the book to them, and it becomes theirs.
Yep, it's true. That is true. Okay, we just have left. The last question is called the blind question.
Okay.
It was made for the last interview. Okay. The last author interviewed.
Okay.
Are you ready for that?
Yeah.
Okay, the author is José Antonio Cotrina, is one of the Spanish authors. He's really good. He's super good. So, but the problem is the question you have already answered, because it's how do you face the very first page of your unwritten books?
Yeah, you know, the very first page is generally not hard for me. Because I will have been planning and imagining this book often for years and years. That said, that first page often gets thrown away, even though it's where I start, where I'm excited to start. The most commonly revised part of one of my books is the beginning. Once I finish it, I realize I started in the wrong place, and I have to throw away that beginning and start over. But facing that first page is not difficult. It's the middle, the kind of the difficult middle where you're in the grind of the book that is the most difficult.
Okay, so there is just the last question is, I need you to make a question for the next one.
Well, I'll ask a different question. How do you face that soggy middle? How do you face that the difficult center of the book where things are getting bogged down and you're not sure if the book is ever going to work? Do you have any strategies for pushing through?
Okay, thank you so much, Brandon Sanderson, for staying here. I hope you enjoy your stay in Spain. See you next time. You're Avilés. I hope it will be soon.
Excellent. I will be back, I'm sure.
Okay. See you. Bye. ¿Sí? ¿Se ha cortado?
No, todo bien.
Wow, thank you so much.